So thank you again, Allison. Welcome for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to have this conversation with you about the Chiron return during midlife and the archetype of the wounded healer. So, yeah, I just would like to start and invite you to share a little bit about your story and your love affair with Chiron and this archetype.
Yeah, I get so emotional. I can feel that when you said love affair. I'm like, oh yeah, that's so special. Yeah, this always happens when I'm on camera. I'm like, oh shoot, here comes the feelings. Yeah, so Chiron. Okay, so Chiron is a myth. It's of a centaur, the story of a centaur, Greek myth. I'll just tell you the story about him, and then I'll go into some of the other things. Okay, so there's an ancient myth about Chiron. Now, Chiron was born from Kronos, who was a Greek name for Saturn. And Kronos decided to have sex, probably rape. Well, it was a rape, actually. A water nymph. And he was interrupted by his mother, Gaia. And so he turned himself into a horse mid-act. And because of that, when the baby was born, he was half horse and half man. And that was Chiron, one of the first centaurs. Now, his mother was so disgusted by the way he looked and the way that, she had so much trauma around it. It was a horrible experience, that she abandoned him. And so that was his first wound, was the abandonment of his parents. However, he had a mentor in the god Apollo, who was the god of music and poetry. And Apollo took him under his wing and raised him as a sort of foster father. So he raised him, it was Apollo and Artemis were the archers. And so he learned archery, he learned poetry, he learned music, he learned science, he learned astrology, he learned to be an oracle. All these beautiful arts came out of him, but he always felt disconnected. He was disconnected because he was a horse and a man. He was already kind of two things together, but he wasn't fully part of the tribe. And he had this huge wound of abandonment. And yet he took other young heroes under his wing. So he had Jason the Argonauts was one of them. And he raised these young men in the arts and the things that he had been taught. So he had this wound of rejection, and yet he had this incredible gift to give back. Other centaurs were sort of known as being carousers and wild, and they were always getting in trouble, and they had so much fire in them. And he was much more refined and almost more a part of the human culture than they were. Okay, so later on in his life, he got into a situation, well, there's different stories about it, but there was a poison arrow, and it was poisoned in the blood of the Hydra, which is like the three-headed creature. And this is what I forgot to say. Because he was a god, was born of a god anyway, he was immortal. So he could live forever. But he had this wound. He got an arrow kind of stuck into his thigh with this poison in it. And when the wound, it was just an incredibly painful wound, but he had to live with it because he couldn't die. He was immortal. So I'm going to take a pause because it's already kind of a long story. But what happens next is he realized that there's no way for him to recover from this wound. He's a chemist, he's a healer. He cannot heal himself from his own wound, and he has to live with it. So at the same time, there's another story happening in the Greek mythology of the god Prometheus, who stole fire from the other gods to give it to humans. He was a great humanitarian, and he was punished. I don't know if you know this story. Are following these stories? He was punished. Another one that couldn't die. They can't die. So they just get punished forever. And so he was tied onto a rock, and he was every day the eagles came and pecked his liver, and the liver would grow back every night. So these terrible stories, these Greeks just had terrible stories, so much trauma on what they did to each other. But Chiron realized that because he was going to be suffering forever with this wound that he couldn't heal, that he could take the place of Prometheus and free him from his punishment. So he took on the sacrifice for this other god, who was also one who gave back to humanity. And eventually the other, I think it was Zeus, that saw him and said, okay, enough is enough. You're a great hero. We respect your martyrdom. And he turned him into one of the constellations, a star in a constellation. Okay, long story. But I wanted to tell you that because there's so much in that myth of this idea that you're a healer and you have so much to give, but you just can't heal your own wounds. And what we do in our Chiron return, which happens around age 50, is we start to realize these wounds are never going to go away. These great insecurities, maybe the sense of abandonment that I've always had from the womb maybe, isn't going to go away. I've done the work, I've done the therapy, I've had the conversations, I've read the books, I've done the somatic stuff. All I can really do now is turn it into a medicine to give back to others so they don't have to suffer in the way that he took on the suffering of Prometheus. So that is the story of Chiron. And that's why it's so dear to me. I just think he's such a wonderful, beautiful archetype to have in one's life if you choose.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There were so many details that I didn't know about the story. And I'm sure that it was interesting also for our listeners to learn about it. And yeah, what an incredible story. What an incredible story also, this situation related to suffering from the, let's call it primary wound, the abandonment, and then the rejection, which is also such an archetypal wound that belongs to so many of us, for sure. And then suffering from this other wound you described, and the poisoned arrow, and then the sacrifice he did for Prometheus. Really such an extraordinary story. And while I was listening to you, I got also curious about what got you into this story and mythology and archetypes. So I go back to what I asked you a little bit before. What did you discover during your own journey?
Okay. I'm being recorded, so I have to think of how personal do I want to be. But I feel that I'm someone who's always, I recognize that healing was always going to be a part of my path pretty early on. I was fascinated by, psychology, and I'm really interested in other people's stories of personal recovery. I have a lot of compassion for people that are going through things because I feel like I can relate on some level. But I feel like where Chiron really came in for me was probably, I'm 51 now. And I feel like it was probably around like 4 or 5 years ago where it kind of came onto my awareness. I wasn't fully into astrology yet. I knew some, I was open, but it didn't really capture my imagination. But someone had done a reading for me and pointed Chiron out in the chart. And Chiron is the myth that I told you about, but it's also the name of an asteroid, which was discovered actually in 1977. So it's been out there the whole time, but it only came into our awareness in 1977. And the 70s, were really a time of kind of self-help coming into the consciousness of at least, Western society. So that is a big thing for me. I'm big on self-help. I think a lot of us are at our age. You know, we kind of grew into that. We came in on that consciousness. But so the asteroid takes about 49 or 50 years to go around the sun. So when you have it on your natal chart, so if you had an astrologer or you pulled up a chart online or something, you would see it somewhere. It looks like a little key, which is a beautiful, symbol for something like a key to your healing. And so I knew when she did my chart that this was coming back around. It was going to come back in a significant way. And something in my imagination just picked up on that. And I read his story, and something in me decided that was going to be the archetype that I wanted to lean into. I was already getting more understanding about how, like with Joseph Campbell's work, with his stuff with mythology was really, really inspiring for me. I love stories. I love fairy tales. I love larger than life characters. I want to live a larger than life, but I'm realizing it doesn't have to play out on the outside. It matters. The larger than life part has to happen in here and in here. That's where the mythology really comes out. And it's very playful and passionate for me. I really love working with these. So anyway, Chiron, I learned that, because of the placement and everything that I have, and I don't want to get too complicated on that. I can take questions later if you like, but I learned a few things that showed me where I had this unconscious wound. And it really is unconscious for most of your life. You can blame all kinds of things. You might feel like you're missing something. You might blame your parents. You might blame your situation. You might blame your finances, your husband, your body. You can be really hard on your own body. But it really is it's supposed to be there. That wound is supposed to sort of fester until it can kind of work itself out and you can own it. And then inside of that is the gift. So I found that mine was in the house of like higher knowledge, or maybe the higher self. So for me, I realized my wound is I'm disconnected from my higher self. I can help other people get into that, but I don't know what that means. I don't trust my own belief system. I was raised in a very religious home. I have a father that's very black and white about things. There was a lot of international travel involving, the development of my thought system. And these are all ninth house things. And that's where mine is. I feel like I need to take a break. I think I'm talking about too many things.
Thank you.
But you can
so
hear you can hear the mind going, and I do have a lot of insecurity about that.
I just want to check if there are some questions on the group. I think there is a comment. Let me see. No, it's just somebody saying hello. Hello, Shannon. Hello, Marion, and hello, Angie. It seems there are a few people watching.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for sharing also about what your personal process has been about. And there were very strong words that you used also about the wound. You said at one point, this wound has to fester until it can become something else, until it can become medicine. That's my understanding, until it can become the gift. So you spoke also about myths and your own journey with that. What would you suggest to women of our age, more or less, who are entering in this process to become perhaps more familiar with this archetype? What is it in your experience that may support them to explore the wounded healer and their own medicine, basically?
Well, for me, astrology has been really helpful. it can be overwhelming if you haven't really fully got into it, but most people have a little bit of understanding of it. They at least know what their sun sign is and maybe their moon sign and rising. But if this strikes a chord in you, it's really helpful, I think, to look at your chart and find out where specifically some of these things might be, because, even when you first see it, you might not only understand it, because remember, it's a shadow. It's supposed to be unconscious for a long time. But there's something about seeing it on the outside of you, having a map that you can look at and kind of point to and go, oh, I'm supposed to have an issue there, that takes some of the emotion away from it and takes some of the overwhelm away. Because then you realize, oh, other people have this too. And I certainly don't judge them for their issues. It's just me judging myself and keeping myself stuck. So I would say if you're curious about this, look at your astrological chart. You can find them online, or you can contact me and I can help you. And kind of just look at what the themes of that section are of the chart. Again, I don't want to get too complicated yet, because there's like 12 different ones that I could go into, but they do really point to something. It could be something about your childhood home. It could be something about, like I said before, like the disconnection with the higher self or the higher mind, like you don't trust your own knowledge. There might be a wound of, like, let's see, maybe another one would be around like your sense of security in a home, whether you have money at any given time. Maybe you're afraid things will always be taken away from you. And if you can look back at your life and start to see there's always been this underlying thing that I blamed other things for, you might begin to see that theme, and having a chart to look at it and see that it's over here. It really isn't just all, I don't know, it's like gives you a mirror to sort of reflect on, I guess. And that's the beginning of stepping away and having the observation and being able to untangle some of that wound. It is for me. The hard part, I think, is recognizing that the only way to really get through that is to take on the things you're afraid of. Like for me, it was like, can I move into these esoteric sciences that I've always been interested in, but maybe afraid that I would get, I don't know, burned at the stake for, or something. You don't know where all these memories come from. We can be very afraid to go into our gifts. And that's part of the reason they're hidden, because it's a journey towards them. But once you start to realize you have a gift in an area that actually has been hidden from you, can give you great vitality in that area. It's very exciting for me to like read tarot cards for somebody. It's very exciting for me to look at someone's chart, but I still hide that from my family. I know I have a lot of gifts to give, but I hide them from the people that I love because I fear rejection. And I'm 51. I'm just at the tail end of my Chiron return. I'm hoping that the next couple of years I'll be able to be more free in all of this. But I'm just being honest, like it's been really hard. It's been a really hard couple of years as this wound has come up into my awareness, hasn't let me go. But that's the beautiful thing. It's not supposed to let you go. This is the time of life that we make this U-turn, and we no longer, it's like we have the medicine now that's been cooking inside of us in the chemistry lab of our hearts. And Chiron was considered a chemist, so you can even imagine him sort of in there, kind of, taking notes, making you ready for the right time when the science is ready to be released. I have a picture right here that I made about some of that. You can see here's my little medicine inside. It's like it's the alchemy of waiting for it to be correct. And then eventually it'll shine out of you, even if you hide it. That's the thing. You either get to like enjoy the gift or not enjoy the gift. You're still going to have the gift. Other people are still going to see it in you and receive it from you. It's just a matter of how conscious of it you want to be. You know, I don't think people stay. I think that the beauty of middle life is that you do get to have another life. There's two lives, but there really are one life. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Many things that you said moved me, included the fact that you mentioned the process of alchemy. This is what I was feeling
My
also
alchemy
when you
pictures.
spoke. When you spoke at the very beginning, also about this, actually, this wound of Chiron that never heals at one point, and yet there is this possibility to always transform something into something else, really. And it made me also think about these ideas that sometimes we have in our culture. You know, sometimes we are so oriented towards, you know, fixing things, and sometimes we have also strange ideas about what healing means, you know, because I think at one point you said that wound was not healable. And perhaps the question is, you know, which kind of relationship do we have with these wounds? Because other things that you mentioned before were about actually taking responsibility versus blaming
Yes.
else or something other than that. And then there is that possibility to bring things to consciousness, to make different choices, basically. And I feel that that is also where the alchemy and the magic take place, which leads to another question, which is, I know that you're an artist and we can see your heart also behind you on your walls. So I'm curious, you know, which role your art and your creativity, you spoke also about imagination before, which role art and creativity and imagination had in this relationship with the archetype?
Well, even before I came here, I just pulled out sketchbooks, and look at all these sketchbooks. I have sketchbooks. I've got 3 more over there. I've got, you know, I just constantly like, oh, well, for example, here's one here. I have Chiron in Aries. A lot of us here have Chiron in Aries. I think our group is probably, if you're born in the late 60s or the mid 60s, the late 60s, you'll have Chiron in Pisces. We're in Chiron in Aries right now. So I have that. And then we go into Taurus. So those are the 3 big generations that we're in this group. And Chiron in Aries has a lot to do with the wound to the self, almost like you feel like you showed up you came to this life with something missing. You're not a complete self. There's something wrong with you. And I noticed in a lot of my artwork for a long time, they were like broken pieces. You know, here I did a similar one here with the broken mirror. Here's another sort of like disconnection piece. I know they're kind of loaded pictures. I won't make them all about these, but you know, a separation from self for me. And I didn't even know I couldn't even name that. But as I look back through my sketchbooks, it's like I would need to work an idea out in order to see it. I couldn't feel it. It's like I missed that piece of information. I missed that piece of myself. I always felt like I had something wrong with me. But now, as I move forward, I've noticed lately my artwork has become a lot more positive. It's like, or it just changed. The story has changed, you know, like for example, the Chiron one, you can start to see the medicine. Here's another one that is me being broken up against, a missing piece. And once I saw enough of those, like, oh my gosh, I'm putting these out in the world. I'm showing people how I feel about myself, that there's something missing. And I didn't even know I was exposing that. But the beautiful thing is I think people can relate. And I look back and I start to see how all these pieces are kind of, it's like an oracle for my own life and I go, oh, there's a part of me that does know. There is a part of me that does have it right. I just have to spend more time with that part. with this stuff in order for me to see it. So for me, it's been a really long process. I'm really grateful for my artwork. You can see right now here, I have that big alchemical piece, and there's like the different elements. And just now I'm at this understanding now that, we are always in some kind of process. You and I, this conversation is a part of that process. The two of us bringing our personalities and energy in is a new piece that hasn't happened before. And there's medicine that comes from that. And so recognizing I can just bring myself into situations and expect the medicine to be there is a very different feeling than I had growing up, which is like, oh, shoot, I think everything was whole until I got here,
Wow, thank you. Yeah, I want to take a little breath and pause.
I know. I can
Yeah,
talk for a while, I know.
well, I just want to honor what you said because it was very potent for me. It resonated very strongly in me, and the art that you showed somewhat, it's something that is coming from your soul. And thank you so much for showing that, for revealing that of yourself. And it takes a lot of courage and openness and vulnerability.
Thank you.
And somewhat for me, what you were saying, it was that when you were drawing intuitively, because there were some pieces missing for you, and yet you were drawing all these pieces with missing pieces or missing limbs or missing faces or puzzles. Somewhat there is the medicine also of exposing the wound somewhat, and the moment the wound is shared or it is exposed, even if it's dangerous to an extent, it's risky, it's vulnerable, it's tender, but there is something that happens there, that is healing because of the courage that it takes, but it's healing also because it's healing for others. And then there is something that, it's yours, but then it's not only yours any longer, it belongs to many. And then your art as well becomes an act of service, because your art is healing you, but is also in service of the healing process of other people.
I love that. Thank you. I mean, I'm feeling, here comes the tears again, but you're absolutely right. And it does take courage to show it, but I feel that back. If somebody tells me, I see what you're doing, I'm moved by that. That is the most validating thing, because it makes you realize, oh, I'm pulling from something greater than myself. This is not something to be ashamed of. This is connecting. These broken things are what connects us. And even thinking about Chiron in generations, like I said, those 3 generations, they're all going to be very similar. I don't think one is worse or better than the other. But if you look back at, I can picture myself in kindergarten, or I don't know, first, second grade, in a little queue outside the classroom to come back in from recess, and just always being like, I'm wearing the wrong thing, I'm in the back of the line, just constantly self-judging myself against the other kids. And then realizing, oh, we all had the exact same issue. We all were born at the same time. We all had this sense that we didn't belong. Or maybe the people in Pisces, we all had some kind of wound of faith that the universe wasn't going to hold us, or that we're going to be punished by that. I mean, that's one of the ways you can look at Chiron and Pisces, and realizing everything that felt alone we just didn't know how to talk about it yet. We're too young. And so we built our sense of self around that wound. But now that we're older and we can talk about it, it's so connecting. It's incredibly connecting.
Thank you. So I'm really curious about the other 2. I think you spoke about Chiron in Pisces and Pisces, if I pronounce it well.
Pisces. That's the one.
I think probably about Taurus and these generations. Could you speak a little bit into that? Just
okay. I kind of threw it in there early, and it probably didn't make a lot of sense. So when Chiron was in Pisces, again, if you don't follow astrology, you don't get too caught up in all of this, but there's these themes, these sort of generational themes, people born at certain times. And Chiron usually takes about 4 years per sign. It just happens to be taking 8 years in the one we're in right now. It's just a little bit longer. But Pisces often has to do with like the psychic self. Maybe I'm kind of putting people in a box with this, but they might have a little more a sense of mysticism, or they might be quite dreamy. There's kind of a manifesting outside of the body kind of thing. But the wound there might have to do with not being okay with those things, not feeling like they're part of this greater universe. Maybe their faith, there might be a crisis of faith that they deal with, or fear of expressing themselves, their sort of psychic selves. The wound that you're being punished by the universe, you're being punished by the greater out there, God. Then the Aries, which is what I am as Aries. If you know the archetype, he's the god of war. It's like he's the groundbreaker. I'm gonna go after things, and we might be like the opposite of that, like stifled, like I'm not fully engaged with myself. I fear that I'm insecure about my abilities, those kinds of things that I mentioned. And then we go into Taurus, which will come in just a couple of years. Then that one is more about your environment, maybe your body, the resources around you, a lot to do with money or how you feel or look in your body. Maybe life feels too fast and you want to slow down. Those are all Taurus things. And I believe you're at the beginning stage of Taurus, Laura. So you probably have all of you've come through the circle of Aries and the wound of self, and now you're coming into the wound of how am I in an environment? Am I secure? And learning to trust that. So I find that Chiron return is about 1.5 years when you go through it. A lot of times it starts at 49, 50, sometimes it starts at 50, but you can start to feel it coming up. I think I really started to feel around 47. And it kind of just built. And then there's certain time through that period of the return, there will be times where you're just kind of triggered, and you can start to map those. I think it's really helpful to map it because it helps you to take it less personally.
So there is a question. I'm just checking the Facebook group. So somebody's asking, and then is it then the Chiron important in every person map? How would you explain that in simple words to somebody maybe who's not too much in astrology?
Well, if you just think about, again, the wounded healer, if we go back to that story and you think of this sort of as a teacher, this placement as a teacher in your life, and remember that, some of the things that you're most insecure about really are meant to be your superpower. It's just a process of healing those things and taking time. So recognizing the themes of where you feel hurt in your life, and accepting them, not fighting them, is one way to engage with Chiron, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just aware that we're going slowly towards the end of this conversation. I wonder if there is anything else that you want to add, or any piece of advice to our listeners in relationship to this exploration of this archetype.
Well, hopefully something has stood out to you that you can take with you, but this is your journey. I'm just sharing my interpretation of what I've learned. Everyone's going to have a little bit different experience, but I just feel that it is a really wonderful tool at midlife to at least, read up on, pay attention to. It's really helped me a lot. So if you need resources, feel free to email me or message me, and I'll try to help.
Thank you. And if you were to distill, what's the biggest gift that Chiron brought to you, or what is the distillation of your medicine?
The word acceptance comes to mind, which for me is really the definition of love. And, to be fully accepted, to fully accept yourself means you can actually start to accept others, but also just knowing that it's meant to take a long time. And you're right where you're supposed to be. Acceptance of where you are on your journey, I think is really helpful. There's nothing to rush.
Thank you. That is such a great reminder that sometimes it's really challenging to fully be with that at midlife, when so many things can, call our attention, and so many of us can feel that we are late, that the clock is ticking, that we haven't achieved many things or the things we wanted, or perhaps we come to accept that there are some losses and broken dreams, or that perhaps we are some kind of late bloomers. I certainly accept myself as such, because many things also come with wisdom, and yet, acceptance, it's really, really a big one. So thank you for that reminder.
Thank you.
Yeah, so where people can find you, and what is it that you offer, if you want to share a bit more specifically about your work?
Oh gosh, well, I don't want to take much longer. We can put a link to my websites on the chat if you like. I do have a couple of art websites. I make artwork. That's my main thing, but I would be happy. I also enjoy, one-on-one sessions with people that like to talk about these things, and tarot readings and things like that. I love to do, but yeah, it's kind of an umbrella of all the things that I had been ashamed of before. I'm trying to be more accepting and sharing my medicine. So
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm just going to read one of the last questions, because I'm checking the Facebook. Somebody wants to know where to read or learn very basic things about it, because
okay.
she's only familiar with the super basics of her chart. So what could she do?
Yeah, that's fine. There was a really great website I pull out sometimes, and I think I was looking at it this morning. It's called Tea and Rosemary. I've looked at lots of different ones, and that one is one of my favorites to talk about Chiron. She's really succinct and clear. So if you just Google Chiron, it might even come up, but but the website is Tea and Rosemary. And I feel like she's one of the more, that's one I recommend. But there's lots of books, and you can get as complicated as you like, obviously.
Thank you. Well, maybe we can put in the comments, remind people of your work and your website. And do you sell your art as well?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we can put all the links.
Please buy my art.
Yeah, we can put all the links to your art, and then maybe we could include also this website, and maybe you could include a couple of books, and then people can ask other questions in the Facebook group, or they can reach out to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you for the people who came. There were some hearts and gratitude in the group, and I'll talk to you very soon. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for supporting this series of Midlife Soul Sisters, and let us know also if there are other topics that you're interested in, or if you want to come forward and be a guest. And thank you so much, Allison. I really appreciated your passion and your smile and the energy that you shared with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.